My wife planned to drug me, forge transfer papers, and flee to Costa Rica with her lover and $8 million. But one critical mistake exposed her entire scheme to the board. 3 weeks ago, my wife tried to drug me over dinner so she could flee to Belize with her personal trainer, an $8 million siphoned from our company's accounts. What she didn't know was that I already knew everything. I let her serve the wine, let her watch me fall asleep, and I recorded everything she did next. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. Her name is Elise. We met when we were both still building our careers, her in finance, me in tech. By the time we co-founded our company in Chicago, we were already married. For years, it was the dream. We worked late, celebrated small wins with champagne, and talked about one day retiring in Spain. Or at least, I thought we talked about it. It all started to change around last summer, when Elise, now 51, became strangely obsessed with the financial side of our business. She started attending board meetings she once ignored, hiring consultants without my approval, and spending late nights auditing our systems. Passwords changed. Locks were added to her home office. She stopped looking at me like a husband and started talking to me like a liability. At first, I blamed stress. But when our business card was declined at a lunch with investors, I decided to check the books myself. What I found made my stomach turn. Emails sent from accounts that looked like mine, authorizing transfers I never approved. Meeting notes showing I'd voted on financial decisions I hadn't even heard of. And the worst part? Security footage of me in the office on weekends when I knew I'd been home. Deep fakes. Realistic enough to pass. I checked our business registry. Elise had created 5 new shell companies over the past year, all with generic names like Marble Ridge Solutions. And there were accounts, offshore, hidden, and bleeding money from our core business. She'd been photographing my signature and pasting it onto forms. Layer by layer, she was framing me for embezzlement. Then I found her second laptop. It was tucked inside a storage container in the attic. On it, I discovered her future life, a beachfront villa in Placencia, Belize, purchased under an alias. Plane tickets for 2 booked in advance. Her and Tyler, her 34-year-old personal trainer, with whom she'd been having an affair for over 2 years. Dozens of emails and love notes. Photos. They'd even chosen names for the baby they planned to have. She was 51, and he was barely out of grad school. It nearly broke me. But instead of confronting her, I did something worse. I played along. I smiled. I moved into the guest room. I stopped engaging. My silence made her nervous, and that gave me an idea. I started small. Moved her coffee cup exactly 1 inch every morning. Tilted her desk lamp by 7 degrees. Swapped 2 books in her bookshelf. Nothing obvious, but just enough to make her question her memory. She started double-locking doors. Installed new security cameras in the hallway. Checked her laptop backups daily. I walked past the hallway cam at precise intervals. 8:30 a.m., 12:30 p.m., 5:30 p.m. On the dot. Let her paranoia eat her alive. At work, I kept my distance. But I also scheduled private meetings with our CFO, Daniel. Meetings Elise wasn't invited to. I told IT to run security updates, routine stuff, but enough to scare her into thinking her files were about to be uncovered. She started backing everything up to 5 different drives. I found all 5. I didn't touch them, just photographed their locations. Then I got my first real lead on Tyler. Turns out, he wasn't just the guy Elise flirted with at the gym. He was receiving regular consulting fees from one of her shell companies, payments that added up to over $150,000 in the past year. I didn't need to confront him. I just started showing up to the gym during their training sessions. I never looked their way, but they noticed. Tyler dropped a 40-pound dumbbell on his foot during one of our silent workouts. Elise started cutting their sessions short. And back at home, her paranoia skyrocketed. She began searching things like, how to tell if your husband is suspicious. Can a deep fake hold up in court? Signs your spouse knows about your affair. I kept watching, documenting, collecting. She didn't know that the moment she tried to frame me, she'd already lost. 2 weeks into my quiet war, Elise made her first major mistake. She used her personal Amex to purchase furniture for Marble Ridge Consulting, one of the fake shell companies she'd used to launder stolen funds. The charge showed up on our shared transaction log, labeled clearly. I took a screenshot, filed it in my growing dossier, and never said a word. She must have realized the mistake that same night. Because I heard her sobbing in her locked office, tearing something to pieces. She thought her scheme was starting to crack. It wasn't. I was still quietly building the hammer. At the office, Elise's nerves started showing. She began wearing sunglasses indoors, pretending it was a migraine. Her coffee intake doubled. She'd fidget in meetings, bring up audit readiness, and review accounts no one had asked for. Daniel, our CFO and, as I'd later confirm, her reluctant accomplice, cornered me near the break room. "Is Elise all right?" he asked, eyes darting toward her closed door. "She's been intense lately," I said flatly. "Maybe some personal stress." Daniel nodded but didn't look convinced. That night, Elise did something she hadn't done in over a year. She made dinner. Real dinner. From scratch. It was lasagna, the same one she used to make every Valentine's Day, back when our marriage wasn't a facade. She wore the dark red dress I'd bought her in Florence. She'd lit candles, put on soft music, poured wine, and pretended like nothing had changed. "We should take a trip," she said, casually sliding a folder across the table. "Somewhere peaceful. Maybe reconnect." The folder contained 2 first-class tickets to Belize. One way, no return date. I took a slow sip from the wine glass she handed me, smiled, said nothing. When she turned to serve dessert, I poured the wine into the ficus plant behind me. She thought she was drugging me that night. She thought that was the beginning of the end. It wasn't. It was the first thread unraveling her entire plan. The next morning, Elise handed me a stack of documents, routine filings, she claimed. I leafed through them slowly, signing each one with deliberate care. I caught it immediately. She'd mistakenly included a real document that transferred $2 million back into our joint business account from one of her hidden offshore vaults. She must have grabbed the wrong page in her panic. I signed it, kept my face neutral. That night, I heard her scream. The sound came muffled through her locked door, but I knew exactly what it meant. The following day, I visited Miles, the branch manager at our main bank, a man I'd known since college. "Just routine," I said as he pulled up our company's account activity. "Some recent transactions look off." His face tightened when the $2 million credit appeared on the screen. It was flagged as coming from an account under the name Limestone Global Holdings. Cayman-based. No history. "Do you recognize this entity?" Miles asked. "Never heard of it." Within minutes, Miles set up dual authorization protocols. From now on, neither Elise nor I could approve major transfers without both present, ID required. That afternoon, Elise tried to use her old card during a working lunch with potential investors. Declined. She had to ask Daniel to cover the bill. The look on her face when she got back to the office was pure humiliation. But she said nothing to me. She couldn't, not without admitting she'd been misusing the company card in the first place. I didn't need to confront her. I just needed her to keep unraveling. She stopped sleeping. Her appearance deteriorated. She looked 10 years older in 10 days. She began wearing long sleeves inside in July. She replaced the lock on her home office with a biometric keypad. She installed 4 additional security cameras in the hallway. Tyler, meanwhile, was cracking. I had a mutual acquaintance at his gym casually mention over lunch that the IRS had started cracking down on cash-paid trainers. That wasn't true, but Tyler didn't know that. 3 days later, he showed up at our front door, pale and sweating, claiming he'd left a duffel bag inside. I smiled at him from the doorway. "Training session, is it?" I asked politely. "I don't believe we scheduled one." He stammered. Elise appeared moments later, voice sharp, waving him off. That night, I overheard them arguing in her office. The walls in our house were thin, thinner than her composure. "You told me he was falling apart," Tyler hissed. "He is. I just need him to sign 2 more authorizations. You said we'd be gone already. Give me 1 more week." But she didn't have a week. Because the next day, she made another critical error. She accidentally sent a confidential email meant for Tyler to our company's general inbox. The subject line was, "Final transfers, schedule, next phase." I intercepted it before anyone else could read it, printed it, and left it on her pillow that night. No note, no warning, just silence. At 1 a.m., the shredder buzzed for over 20 minutes straight. And the best part? That wasn't even her final mistake. Tuesday morning started like any other. Until I found the letter. Not from Elise. Not from Tyler. It was buried under a stack of folders in her attic stash. An old email, printed and half-crumpled, like she'd meant to throw it out, but forgot. The subject line, boy name ideas, baby bottle palm tree. She was 51. I'm 53. We'd agreed years ago that children weren't in the cards for us. Age, timing, life, it just never fit. We traveled instead, built a company, toasted anniversaries in different countries. No regrets, I thought. But this letter? It told a different story. The list included names like Carter, Jax, and Milo, with a handwritten note next to Milo, Tyler's favorite yellow heart. There were details about a nursery decorated in palm trees, links to custom surfboard mobiles, a list of OBGYN clinics in San Jose, Costa Rica. It wasn't just betrayal. It was replacement. I wasn't being cheated on. I was being erased. And in that moment, my anger calcified into something far colder, resolve. It brought back a memory I hadn't touched in over a decade. 15 years ago, my younger sister called me sobbing. Her fiancé, someone we all trusted, had wiped out her nonprofit's accounts. Embezzlement. She was left with nothing but lawsuits and shame. I helped her through it, paid her rent, sat with her through legal meetings. But what stuck with me was something she said late one night, curled on my couch, eyes swollen from crying. It's not the money that breaks you, she said. It's realizing they were lying while holding your hand. I'd held Elise's hand through vacations, board meetings, and anniversary toasts, and she'd lied through it all. That night, I stopped playing defense. I decided I wouldn't just protect what was mine. I'd take back everything she tried to steal. The next day, Elise returned to my office with Daniel trailing behind her like a guilty dog. She carried a folder full of new routine paperwork and wore a peach blouse I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary. These just update some account permissions, she said lightly. Mostly international filings. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept in days. His knuckles were white against the manila folder. I flipped through the stack, pretending not to notice the 2 transfer documents buried in the middle, forms that would have given Elise full authority over our offshore accounts. If I signed them, I'd be cut out completely. I stopped at those pages. These need legal review, I said casually, setting them aside. Elise's smile twitched. They're time-sensitive. Then we might lose the opportunity, I replied. New policy. I don't sign anything unreviewed. Daniel shifted beside her, sweat beading along his temple. He was breaking. Soon, he'd crack. That evening, I replaced the sedatives in her vitamin bottle, the ones I knew she planned to use on me, with harmless vitamin C tablets. I installed micro cameras in the dining room and changed the Wi-Fi password so her hidden cloud sync tools couldn't upload anything without tripping alerts. 2 days later, Elise made her move. She cooked a 3-course meal, lobster risotto, truffle salad, and my favorite bourbon-glazed salmon. She wore the red dress she hadn't touched in a year and poured the wine herself, handing me the heavier glass. I fake-sipped, excused myself halfway through, then passed out at the table, face down in my folded arms. She sprang into action. First, she searched my wallet, pulling out the passwords I'd planted, carefully curated to trigger security lockouts. Then she sprinted upstairs to her office. 3 failed login attempts, all caught on camera. A minute later, her phone rang. It was Tyler. You said he'd be out cold, he snapped, his voice coming through on speaker. He was, she hissed. I don't know how none of the passwords work. I'm done, Elise. You said this would be clean. Don't do this to me, she pleaded. I just need more time. There is no us, he snapped. You're on your own. Click. Silence. She sat down on the floor and sobbed. Violently. The kind of sobbing that made her shoulders quake. Her whole plan, 3 years of deceit, had just collapsed in one speakerphone call. I waited another 30 minutes before slowly lifting my head. Elise. I mumbled groggily. Feel off. She rushed over, trying to help me to bed. I brushed her hand off and stumbled down the hall. Must be bad wine, I said. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing through the house, her footsteps echoing like a metronome of panic. The next morning, I walked into Daniel's office without knocking. I'm done, he said before I could speak. I can't do this anymore. Then help me end it, I said. You tell me everything. Every shell company, every login, every lie. You walk away clean. Otherwise, you go down with her. He nodded, eyes wet. She promised no one would get hurt, that it was all just a safety plan. I didn't answer, because there was no point. That afternoon, I made Elise an offer. I'll sign whatever you need, I told her. Let's just get this over with. Her face lit up. She didn't know that she'd already lost. That Daniel had flipped. That her drugging attempt had been recorded. That I'd intercepted her emails, documented every shell company, and even spoken to the private investigator she thought was fake. She thought I was still in the game. But I wasn't. I was the dealer now. And the house always wins. Sunday night, Elise didn't sleep. I did. While she tore through her office in panic, shredding documents, burning files, whispering into burner phones, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Not because I was free of fear, because I knew she was finally drowning in hers. The audit was set for 9 a.m. Monday. The board expected a routine quarterly review. By lunchtime, they'd be staring at the unraveling of a multi-million-dollar fraud engineered by one of their own. At 5:40 a.m., I found her in the kitchen. Barefoot, haggard, eyes hollow. Her laptop blinked with an access denied message. The banking portal was locked. So were the offshore accounts she'd spent years cultivating. I poured myself orange juice and sat across from her, like it was any other Monday morning. The audit team will be here in a few hours, I said. Sandra's bringing 2 external forensic accountants. Alexander from the bank's joining too. She blinked slowly. Processing. Then without a word, she rose and walked out. No attempt to argue. No plea. Just retreat. At 6:30, I found her in our bedroom, shoving clothes into a suitcase. The remnants of her shredded Costa Rica tickets still lay scattered on the floor. Going somewhere? I asked from the doorway. She didn't look up. Just zipped the suitcase and stuffed her expired passport in her purse. You won't make it far, I said quietly. I flagged your alias at every major airport. TSA's watching for Elena Ramos. They'll detain you the second you scan that ticket. She froze, hand still on the zipper. Then she spun around, eyes blazing. You planned this, she spat. Every detail. Every camera. You let me keep going just to watch me fall. I met her eyes. I wanted you to finish your painting, so you couldn't claim I'd ruined your masterpiece. Outside, a car door slammed. The audit team had arrived. We walked to the front door together. Her hands were shaking. Sandra stood on the porch in a gray blazer, flanked by 2 stern accountants with briefcases. Alexander, the bank manager, was already logging into a company tablet. Good morning, Sandra said briskly. We're here for the audit. Alexander's joining due to the flagged account activity. Elise stepped aside wordlessly and let them in. The dining room became a war room. Cables, laptops, files stacked high. Sandra sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. Elise chose the seat across from her. I stayed near the side, close enough to listen but far enough to stay uninvolved. Let's begin with Sunset Global Holdings, Sandra said, clicking through a file. Can you explain these wire transfers? Elise was silent for 3 full seconds. Then, it's a shell company I created. Sandra didn't blink. And these others? Emerge Ltd? Coral Axis? All shell companies, used to move funds offshore through layered transactions. Alexander looked up from his records. All routing to Cayman and Belize accounts under aliases tied to your personal email. Elise nodded, her voice thin. Yes. What followed was 3 hours of pure unraveling. Elise walked them through every step of her scheme. How she'd used photographs of my signature to authorize fake transactions. How Daniel had helped falsify financial reports. How she'd used AI-generated video to build false narratives of my involvement. She handed over passwords, disclosed safe combinations, and explained every account name, every layered transaction. When Daniel arrived with his attorney, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He confirmed Elise's story and gave his own statement. She said it was to protect our assets, that it was proactive, but I knew it was wrong. Sandra typed furiously. You were promised a share? 10%, he replied. I never received it. Elise didn't deny it. Tyler's name came up next. She admitted to funneling $320,000 to him under the guise of fitness consulting, masked through a subsidiary in Panama. Sandra raised an eyebrow. Is he reachable? Not anymore, I interjected. He left his apartment last night. Took everything. Disconnected all contact. The forensic team kept gathering data, and Elise kept answering. No resistance. No deflection. She looked like someone who had been waiting to confess. At 1:50 p.m., Sandra finally closed her laptop. This constitutes large-scale corporate fraud, she said quietly. The board will convene an emergency session tomorrow to vote on your termination and whether to file criminal charges. Elise gave the faintest nod. As the team packed up, Sandra turned to me. "This wasn't your fault," she said. "The company will survive." "But Elise." "She made her choice," I replied. After they left, Elise and I sat in silence. I slid a manila envelope across the table. "Divorce papers." Her name was already printed beside mine. "You'll sign these. You'll transfer all company shares to me. And then you'll leave." She didn't resist. Just took the pen. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. "I don't care." She signed. Her last signature as my wife. As a partner. As anything. She stood, shouldering her suitcase, then turned at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, voice hoarse, "I'm sorry. Not for what I did, but for who I became." I didn't reply. She walked out. The door closed behind her. And for the first time since this began, the house felt still. But it wasn't over. Tomorrow, the board would decide her fate. And I still had one final move left to play. The boardroom was silent when the audit team arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. I'd been there since 7:30, reviewing one last time the digital file I'd compiled. Videos, audio recordings, forged documents. Every piece of the 3-year deception Elise had orchestrated. Sandra began, without ceremony. "We're here to formally address financial misconduct by Executive Elise Hartwell. All members have been provided a summary of the external audit." Her name hit the air like a hammer. I laid out the entire story in full. The drugging attempt, the deep fakes, the forged transfers, and the shell companies traced to the Cayman Islands. The piece de resistance was the hidden camera footage, Elise drugging my wine, stealing what she thought were passwords, then scrambling to execute the final transfer before collapsing into a sobbing mess. When the video ended, no one spoke for nearly 30 seconds. Then the CFO, Marcus, cleared his throat. "Everything he said is true. I participated under duress, but I confirm every detail." A vote was taken. Unanimous. Elise was terminated, stripped of any future stake in the company, and the board committed to full prosecution. 3 days later, her attorney reached out. Elise had resurfaced in Mexico. She wanted me to testify on her behalf, asked the court to consider leniency. She framed it as a personal appeal. A plea. I deleted the message without responding. Weeks passed. My life began to settle. I'd hired a locksmith, cleared out Elise's office, and had her private belongings boxed and stored. The house felt sterile at first, almost hollow. But that was just the absence of tension. I reclaimed my mornings, reconnected with clients, and re-established a new routine. Peace had a flavor I'd almost forgotten. And then came the phone call. Elise had been arrested at the U.S. Mexico border, trying to re-enter under a second fake identity. Her funds had dried up. Tyler had disappeared. With nowhere to go, she'd attempted to come back and negotiate, hoping to leverage anything left. But there was nothing. The trial moved quickly. She pled guilty to felony wire fraud, embezzlement, and attempted assault. Her lawyer tried for sympathy, citing stress and paranoia. The judge wasn't moved. 5 years in federal prison. Full restitution. No parole. I attended the sentencing, sitting quietly at the back. Elise looked gaunt and ghost-like in her orange jumpsuit. For the first time in years, she didn't pretend. She looked at me once and gave a tired nod. Not apology, not anger. Just acknowledgement. She'd lost. Marcus, who had turned state's witness, received 2 years probation and community service. He surrendered his CPA license and started working at his brother's diner. Tyler vanished without a trace. No paper trail, no social media, not even a ping on the usual IRS watch lists. I assumed he was in South America, living off whatever Elise had funneled him before everything fell apart. The company endured. Sandra stayed on permanently as part of the board. We restructured entirely. What Elise had tried to destroy became stronger, leaner, and more transparent than ever before. Elise's Costa Rica villa, purchased under her alias, was seized and sold. The proceeds went toward repaying what she stole. A retired Canadian couple bought it. I hope they never learned its history. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd confronted her earlier. Could we have fixed it? Could therapy or honesty have stopped the spiral? But those thoughts fade quickly. I remember the secret laptop in the attic, the staged security footage, the photos of her with Tyler, the faked baby registry at age 52. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a choice. And in doing so, she gave me mine. I've never remarried. Maybe one day. Maybe not. Trust, when broken so deliberately, doesn't rebuild overnight. But I found something else: peace. A future. My mornings are mine now. So are my nights. The last I heard, Elise was teaching bookkeeping to other inmates. Maybe she was finally using her skills for something that wasn't rooted in deceit. Or maybe she was just getting better at hiding it. I don't care anymore. She tried to ruin me. Instead, she freed me. And that, more than the sentencing, the restitution, or the vanished lover, is what made me feel truly whole again. She lost everything, and I got everything back.